little bit quick explanation I'll give you. So in today's lecture, good morning everyone. In today's lecture, we'll be discussing about the defenses that are available against the tort of defamation. Till now, we have discussed about the concept. We have said that defamation can be libel or slander. There are three requirements: publication, reference to the plaintiff, and it should be defamatory in nature. So when we talk about defenses that are there under defamation, there are comment that has been made, or there exist privileges. So we'll take up these three defenses one by one. First, we'll be taking up about the aspect of justification of truth, where we say that under the civil law, merely proving that the statement was true is a good defense. The reason for the defense is that the law will not permit a man to recover a damage in respect of an injury to a character which he either does not or ought not to possess. The defense is available even though the publication is made maliciously, if the statement is substantially true but incorrect in respect of certain minor particulars. The defense will still be available. Now, to understand this position, this is a very good case where we can understand that what is it talking about. When we say we talk about publication, and their publication you are making is of the true statement. So this is a case where the plaintiff was riding a train and was convicted of riding a train without any valid ticket. So the plaintiff was charged with a penalty, with a fine, and a period of imprisonment that was for 14 days. And if there is any default in making payment of that fine. After the conviction was made, the defendant published a notice against the plaintiff describing the conviction of plaintiff and issuing and stating that if in case the fine is not paid, then there will be a further imprisonment of 3 weeks in the default of making the payment of the fine. The plaintiff, in this case, the person who has been accused of traveling without a ticket, alleged that the defendant has committed a libel by describing the penalty issued to him inaccurately. So this was the main claim. So defendant argued that the conviction was described with substantial and sufficient accuracy, and the words so far as they differed in their literal meaning from the words of the conviction was not libelous. So but the judgment was given in this particular case, the judgment was given in favor of the defendant. And when we talk about the entire understanding of this case is that when we talk about the gist of libel, we say that here the gist was that the plaintiff was sentenced to pay a sum of money. There was some fine that was imposed. And in default of payment, there is some imprisonment. So what is it? It says that the substantial information is correct, but it might be wrong in its small particulars that can be avoided. Right. So in this case, it was said that the substance of the libel was true, but the question was whether what was stated inaccurately will be considered as libel or not. The court said that things that are very not substantial at all, they can be avoided. And what matters is that the statement which is made is true. So it was true that the person has been fined, and if there is default, then there will be imprisonment. It will be followed by an imprisonment of 14 days. Okay. So even if we want to apply the test of justification by truth, right? Though the fact that an alleged incident was reported to the police may not be a serious dispute, reporting of distorted or any kind of distorted comments you are giving, the versions that you are giving have been tampered with, right? You do not have any proper verification of facts. Then in that case, it has been held to be defamation. That is, you should have some justification for your statement. If you have no justification, if you cannot verify your facts, then in such cases, any comment which has been made can be categorized as defamation. So such defamatory statement made in a publication, right, can be awarded, can be taken up as the matter of defamation. And this can be understood with this case, Radheshyam Tiwari versus Eknath, where the defendant published defamatory statement against plaintiff but could not prove that the facts published were true. And therefore, it was held that the person is liable for defamation. So burden of proof in short lies on the person claiming or making that statement that some other person has committed some crime or some offense or some wrong. So the person making a defamatory statement will have to prove that whatever I have stated is justified, whatever I have stated is true to the facts. Whatever exists, I have published that. I have communicated that aspect. So that is what is taken into consideration while deciding whether defamation exists or not. And definitely, it depends upon the facts of the case in order to decide whether the particular statement is defamatory or not. If there is justification, it will not be. But if there is no justification, then in that case, it will amount to defamation. Right? Now, next defense is fair comment. Now, making fair comment on matters of public interest is a defense to an action for defamation. Now, this is what already I've discussed, that what public interest is. Any subject that includes any public welfare is a matter of public interest. So generally, it is available to authors, editors, critics, etc. To comment means to critically analyze existing facts. What are the existing facts that are there? It is an expression of opinion on certain facts rather than making a statement of fact or invention of new facts. You're giving your opinion. So any opinion you are making is covered under the comment. Now, there are three things you need to understand: that what type of comment it should be. It should be an opinion, and it should not be something that you're creating any fact. Then the comment that you're making, it should be fair. And third, it must be in the public interest. Within this, that the comment is there. Within this aspect of fair comment, there should be three things that you should look into. First of all, there is a comment. This comment is your opinion. Second, the opinion is fair, and you have made that opinion in the interest of public. This is what it relates to. So when we talk about this, there are two things, there are few essentials that are required. One is appreciation of existing facts and not invention of new facts. That is applied only to expression of opinions rather than to statements of fact. It should be bona fide, that it should be fair without malice, and it should be made in public interest. So these are three requirements for considering a fair comment. Now the question comes that as to what a comment is. So comment means an expression of opinion on certain facts. You're giving your opinion. And this is something which should be distinguished from making a statement of fact. So when we talk about this comment, we say that a fair comment is a defense by itself. Whereas when we talk about you making a statement of fact, right, that can be excused only if you have justification or privileges to prove that why you have made that statement of fact. So fair comment is per se, you can say that yes, it's a defense. But if you're making a statement of fact, you have to justify that statement of fact. Either you are privileged to make such a statement, right, or you have some other justification for making that statement. So whether a statement is a fact or not, or is it a comment, or is it a mere opinion, it is a fair comment. It depends on language which is used in the context. Now, to understand this, let's go through the example where we will understand what we mean by opinion. For example, A says of a book published by Z, Z's book is foolish. Z must be a weak man. Z's book is indecent. Z must be a man of impure mind. These are only comments, right? Now A will be protected if he has said this in good faith. But if A says, I am not surprised that Z's book is foolish and indecent, for he is weak man and a libertine, it is not a comment on Z's book, but is rather a statement of fact. And the defense of fair comment will not be applicable. So it depends upon the language that you are using, whether that language is mere opinion or not, right? Another important aspect in this, when we say that since we say that it is necessary that the comment must relate to certain facts, it is also essential that the fact commented upon must be either known to the audience, address, or the commentators should make it known along with the comment. So it is something which is known to the public. Like for example, If we say X says that A has been held guilty of breach of trust and therefore he is a dishonest man, the later words are comment on the former. But if the former words are not known to the audience, right, and X publishes that A is a publish what A is a dishonest man, it is not a comment but a statement of fact. The plea of fair comment cannot be taken up, right? So they should be aware of this fact that he was guilty of breach. Clear, it should be known, it should be only an opinion, it should be a comment. So comments must be fair. This is another thing that is there. That is another aspect. When we talk about this, we say that whatever comment you're making is fair or not, it is what depends upon whether the defendant honestly held that particular opinion is been given in public interest, right? So it is not the opinion of the court as to the fairness of comment, but the opinion of the commentator. Court will not say that whether it is the opinion where the court is giving whether it is a fair comment or not. But when we talk about this, we are saying that what that commentator is giving, what you and me are giving. Like we can write articles, we can write any case comment, we can give our opinions. So this has been something which has been stated by Justice Diplock in this case, where he says that the true test was this is an opinion, however exaggerated, obstinated, or prejudiced, which was honestly held by the writer. Now, all those who are into writing, they read. You must be reading your editor's page, right? In newspapers, we have editor's page. What are these? These are fair comments. These are opinions that are given by the editors with respect to a particular situation that is existing. Is it clear? So everybody have this freedom of speech and expression. Always keep this in mind. But this freedom of speech and expression has to be balanced with the right to protect your reputation and dignity. These two things go hand in hand. If you remember the last lecture, it has been said that if you remember, I mentioned that fundamental rights are not mutually exclusive. You have to read them together. Then the matter commented upon must be of public interest, right? And I have already explained what public interest is, so I will not dwell into this again. Again and again, I'm talking about public interest. Next defense that is available is privilege. Now, there are certain occasions when the law recognizes that the right of free speech outweighs the plaintiff right to reputation. Okay, the law treats such occasions to be privileged, and a defamatory statement made on such occasion is not actionable. And in order to understand this, we need to understand that it is of two kinds, that is absolute privilege and qualified privilege. So here again, like I said, you do have right to freedom of speech and expression, but it has to be balanced with the right to protect your reputation and dignity. Clear? But there are certain conditions, there are certain situations where right to freedom of speech and expression overweighs the plaintiff right to reputation, right? Now these, what are these? Like absolute privileges, where we have three categories under absolute privileges. So before coming to that, what is absolute privilege? So when we talk about this, we say that in matters of absolute privilege, no action lies for the defamatory statement, even though the statement is false or has been made maliciously, right? Now in such case, the public interest demand that an individual right to reputation should give way to freedom of speech, right? What are they saying? That we have, this should be in our interest, it is in the interest of public, it is the public interest that the reputation should be given a backseat, and freedom of speech and expression should be what should be upheld. So these are certain things where the following cases the absolute privilege applies. One is the parliament proceedings, second judicial proceedings, and third is state communication. So when we talk about parliamentary proceedings, here we will refer to the constitutional provisions and parliamentary proceedings that is given under Article 105, Clause 2 of the Constitution, that provides clause A that states that the statement made by a member of either house of parliament in the parliament itself, the publication by or under the authority of either house of parliament of any report, paper, votes or proceedings, then these cannot be questioned under the court, before the court of law. A similar privilege exists in respect of state legislatures as per section 190, article 194 clause 2 of the constitution. So this is parliamentary proceedings are going on in wherein you have been given absolute privilege. You have freedom of speech and expressions, right, to convey your opinions, your suggestions with respect to an existing situation. Another one is judicial proceedings. So when we talk about this, we say that no action for libel or slander lies, whether against a judge, counsel, witnesses, or parties, for words that are written or spoken in the course of proceedings before the court, right, which is recognized by the law, even though the words written or spoken were maliciously spoken or written without any justification or excuse. So, whatever you are doing before the court of law, it is somewhere exempted, and from any personal ill will also, if you are doing anger also against any person defamed. So such privileges also extend to proceedings of tribunal that are there in the tribunal setup as well. And this is something which is the protection to judicial officers in India is granted under the Judicial Officers Protection Act 1850 is what is granted. And the councils have also been granted absolute privilege in respect of any word spoken by that particular council in the course of pleading the case. When they're pleading the case of their client, they have been given this absolute privilege. But however, the words spoken by the council are irrelevant, not having any relevance to the matter before the court, such a defense cannot be pleaded. So you have to see that it should relate to what you are speaking. The privilege claimed by a witness is also subject to similar limitations, that what is related, you have to. So it's not that the absolute means that absolute in the sense with respect to the matters connected, not with respect to the matters that are not connected. Clear? So there is this case which is Jeevan Mai versus Lashman Das. Now you can go through this case where the court has given a remark and that it rejected the defense of privilege and held that defendant are liable. So it is very important for you to understand that what type of comments you can make. It should relate to your case. It should not go beyond the limits, right? What you are stating, yes, you can say, but it should be within the limits of the case, the present case that you are taking up pleading before the court. Clear? So you can go through this. I'll post all the PPTs on MS Teams. Now, within this, we have another one, that is State Commission. A statement made by one officer of the state to another in course of official duty is absolute privilege for reasons of public policy. Such privilege also extends to reports made in course of military and naval duties. Communications relating to state matters made by one minister or another by ministers to the crown is also absolute privilege. So within this, you are doing your duty, you are being exempted. Within privilege, we have qualified privilege. Now, qualified privilege, the defense of qualified privilege is something which is available only in certain cases. Unlike the defense of absolute privilege, in this case, it is necessary that the statement must have been made without malice. So, because it is qualified, it is not the term absolute. So, qualified means that there should something that you need to prove. For such a defense, if you want to take up, it is further necessary that there must be an occasion of making such statement. You are not just making statement randomly, you're making the statement in certain circumstances. So it is available either when the statement is made in discharge of duty or protection of an interest, or the publication is in the, like within this we also include any report of parliament, judicial report, public proceedings, right? So you have to prove certain things in order to have this particular defense of privileges. That is, apart from what all you need to prove is that there must be, yes, these are two things that you need to prove: that the statement was made on a privileged occasion, okay, it was discharged of the duty of protection of interest is the first one, and the statement is made without any malice is the second essential. So when we talk about this, the first one, the occasion when there is a qualified privilege to make defamatory statement without malice should exist when there is some duty that exists, or you have any legal duty or social or moral duty to make such statement, or existence of some interest for the protection of people for whom you're making it, right? Like in case of publication of any matter in newspaper, duty to public has to be proved that it was required in the interest of the public. And if such duty is not proved, then the plea of qualified privilege will fail. The plea will also fail if plaintiff proves the presence of malice or evil motive in the publication of that defamatory matter. So one need to keep in mind that it is something which is published. You have a proof, you have a duty, it is in public interest, right? Next is when we talk about statement, we have already discussed this while discussing the parliamentary proceedings, that the reports of parliamentary proceedings published by or under the authority of either of houses are under absolute privilege. But however, if the proceedings are published without the authority of the house, now when will it become qualified privilege? When if it is published without the authority of the house, then in that case qualified privilege is claimed, where you have not taken the permission, but still you want to avoid the defense of defamation, you can uh, uh, claim qualified privilege where there is no permission, provided again that the publication is made without malice or public good, right? It is for the public good that you are making it. So apart from these, the publication of judicial quasi proceedings, they enjoy qualified privileges. Report to commissions which are set up to inquire into the matter. The privileges does not extend. It extends to this also, but it does not extend to the report of court proceedings which are not of public interest, or to the proceedings to which the public is not admitted. So if you are going to publish such report, it will amount to defamation. Clear? So when we talk about this, we say that qualified privileges is something that allows the journalism to be very out spoken, and it allows them to publish defamatory statement, provided they have to show that it is without malice, it is in public interest, right? And it is their definitely is their duty to disclose to the society, to tell the society that what is existing, and this is their right to know that how their societal norms are working or what is going on in their society, right? But only under certain circumstances the gate they can do. Okay, so the greatest difference between absolute and qualified privilege is that I'll come to again to this, is that unlike absolute privilege, qualified privilege comes with conditions. So the difference will do, but this is a small topic that I would like to discuss with you. So in order for a journalist to have legal protection from being sued, their work is required to be fast, accurate, and fair. These are certain requirements. Now, these are certain differences between the qualified and absolute uh, privileges. And you can go through this case, and in this it has been stated that in absolute privilege, the defendant gets absolute exemption from liability. In a qualified privilege, the defendant gets a conditional exemption. In absolute privilege, statements are protected in all circumstances, irrespective of good or bad motives. Whereas in qualified privilege, even after a case of qualified privilege is taken up by the defendant, it is required that it should be proved that there was no ill motive, it was without any evil motive, and in which case the defense of plaintiff have to show that it is in the interest of public. Okay, in absolute privilege as well as qualified privilege, though, the defendant has to prove his plea of privileges. They will plead that I should be debarred from being convicted for the tort of defamation. Okay, and we have already said, I've already stated that a qualified privilege is the defense is not absolute, but it can, and whereas absolute privileges which cannot be refuted by the plaintiff. So the difference lies here. We need to understand that what is the difference, and you can go through this the case that has been specified. Now there is another type of defense which is there, that is apology. Now, under English law, this is a good defense. Indian law, it will be taken as a defense only if the plaintiff agrees to it, right? If the apology, if the plaintiff agree, only then it will be taken up, otherwise not. There are a few remedies, that is suit for damages you can file, injunctions you can file, or restraining the defendant from publication of defamatory matter, or you can punish under IPC. Now from here we need to understand that whether the defamation exists against the deceased person or not. Now, when we are talking about and this aspect, which is a very interesting aspect of defamation, right? Then here we say that it is only a wrong if the defamation is a nature which harms the reputation of a person who is alive, which is a basic rule of defamation, right? And in most cases, this translates to saying that it is not a tort to defame a deceased person, since as a general rule, the plaintiff need to be able to prove that the defamatory words refer to. So when a person is not alive, how can you say that it refers to that person? But this does not mean that there can be no cause of action against a dead person. If a dead person is defamed, right? If, for example, a defamatory statement negatively impacts the reputation of deceased person legal heirs or representatives, an action can be taken up and it is maintainable. So if not the deceased person, but yes, if the statement is such a harm that the legal heirs are impacted because of that statement, they can bring an action for defamation. Another important aspect, or you can say interesting aspect, is will the pre-publication amounts to defamation. So as a general rule, if an action for defamation is instituted and defamation is found to have been committed, damages will be payable to the plaintiff. Okay, this is as a general rule which is there. If it is found, only damages are given. But in addition to this, a person who is apprehensive of being defamed in a public may seek the grant of injunction to restrain such publication. Okay, and when we are talking about this, we say that these injunctions are rarely granted by the Indian courts, and there are very few cases where injunctions are granted for the pre-publication or for the where there is a possibility that a person will be defamed, right? There are cases, but yes, there are very less cases, like in and Indian court follow the principle which is laid down in Bernard versus Perryman case. And here the court has jurisdiction, where the court stated that the court has jurisdiction to restrain by injunction and even by an interlocutory injunction the publication of libel, but the exercise of the jurisdiction is discretionary, and an interlocutory injunction ought not to be granted except in the clearest cases. In cases in which, if a jury did not find the matter complained to be libelous, the court would set aside the verdict as unreasonable. An interlocutory injunction ought not to be granted when the defendant swears that he will be able to justify the libel and the court is not satisfied that he may not be able to do so. And this is the principle which has also been followed by the division bench in by the Indian courts. It has been followed in Khushwant Singh versus Menka Gandhi case also. You can go through this, right? So Indian courts have shown a tendency, because why we say that that whether the pre-publication should not be defamation, because we do have freedom of speech and expression also. And Indian judiciary believes that there should be balancing, there should be harmonious construction between the two provisions. And we have to see that where the balance lies. Is it the public interest or is it the protection of the reputation? And accordingly, it will be taken up, the matter will be taken up in the favor of a party and not otherwise. So when we talk about any matter, any topic, we need to understand that any offense or wrong is decided judiciously by the court, taking into account all the aspects and relevant evidences that are available. Okay, with this we are done with our defamation. Uh, uh, Completely, entirely, we have completed our defamation. Next week we'll be talking about other topics, like if, let's say we can take up absolute liability or strict liability, whichever it is. We'll carry on with our syllabus next week. Okay.